Welcome back, everybody, to Along the Watchtower. This is a podcast where I, Alan Walker, go through, the day's news, the week's news, sometimes the months and the year's news to try and paint a picture about a particular topic, subject, or idea that I may have in mind. Usually it entails just talking about the news for the day and me expressing my opinion and or bitching and going on a monologue. That being said, today is Tuesday, December 24th? 3rd, damn it. December 23rd, 2021. And I hope you are doing well. I am doing fantastic. Thank you for asking. In general, we have a progressing situation on the front of the stimulus. The House voted on it. It's looking like everything is going to be set for like around March 12th, March 15th-ish or so for the first checks to start coming out. I actually think March 12th, March 12th should be is it a Monday or Friday? Whatever, it doesn't matter. March 12th is a Friday. So then it wouldn't be the 15th. It would be the following Friday. I'm not sure why Friday. So it would probably be that Monday. So it's the week of the 12th. Anyway. But it's looking like that's going forward, and so that's good news. However, there is a lot of infighting going on. Just before I came on, I was seeing something about Manchin, and he said something big, apparently. So the only thing that I can imagine is him either backtracking on minimum wage, backtracking on, possibly being a hitch in the road for budget reconciliation, because they do need all the Democrats to be on board. And as we know, he's a blue dog Democrat, a moderate Democrat. And it's interesting. I do like the way that it's phrased when people consider moderate, like when people consider anyone who does not want to provide what is needed in a crisis an extremist. I can understand that framing. I mean, the reality is that people trying to play politics, if they're not extremists, political extremists at the very least, then they're opportunists and misanthropists who are taking advantage of disadvantaged people. That being said, playing politics during this time is it's the worst. You should, and it's like, is it worse to play politics now during a domestic crisis or before when there was an escalating body count for a foreign war we shouldn't have engaged in? I always want to excuse me. I always want to try and digest things from as many perspectives as possible, to try to empathize as much as possible. Because at the end of the day, we're all living our lives the way that we live them from the perspective that we see them from. We don't know what it's like to be in Afghanistan. We don't know what it's like to be in sub-Saharan Africa, or to be in Venezuela, to be in the Philippines, to be in Burma, or Myanmar. But at any rate, I don't really. I've been trying to remain centered and focused, so the likelihood of monologues decrease, and that's the thing, because monologues tend to be cathartic releases that should be lessened as focus is gained. That being said, I'm okay. I'm okay. Markets took a huge dip, which is just a Black Friday as far as I'm concerned. So that's good news, As for AMC's doing well. I'm not a financial advisor. However, I do have a position. And I'm just excited for anyone who is listening or watching who may or may not be in the markets or be interested. Do your homework. Everything is about homework. Everything is about information. That being said, please like, share, and subscribe if you like what I'm doing. We're gonna jump back and forth between current political events and some COVID news. There hasn't really been a lot internationally going on, or at least not a lot being reported. And honestly, there's so much going on domestically. I haven't been doing a lot of digging. So yeah, I mean that's about the long and short of it. One second. That being said, let's get into the news. So Bill Gates was roasted for saying that countries should eat 100% synthetic beef. Oh my God. Market Watch 2. Bill Gates. I don't have the funds to pay for this. You know what I mean? I'm not going to do it. So rich nations should shift entirely to synthetic beef. There we go. It still hasn't loaded though. All right. Always working out the kinks. That being said, Bill Gates thinks that we should be eating synthetic beef. I am inclined to think that someone like Bill Gates would say something like that. However, I don't disagree with him. See, here's the thing. Bill Gates has long since been considered a eugenist from the perspective of not only conspiracy theorists, but I mean intellectuals as far as those who are of the upper echelon who constantly talk about environmentalism from the perspective of population control. There we go. So it isn't that as though he's outright called for the culling of people. Please, far be it from me to suggest that. Let's not go that far. However, he has definitely spoken about overpopulation. He's definitely spoken about green initiatives that include the ratifying of new laws internationally, things like that. So yes, it is kind of sounding like what it seems like. The subtext is very globalist, very, unitarian, not utilitarian, but unitarian, very unifying principle. Everybody and that's the thing. It isn't the idea that's the problem. It's the likely execution that I've always had a concern with. Those in power, because you look at these large organizations and these large foundations, and they usually have a lot of skeletons in them, ergo the Clinton Foundation and the Haiti Fund and that whole situation. And so I just found it interesting, oh, Bill. It's not surprising. No, I'm not going to read the article. I do support the creation of synthetic beef. I think we've covered that via Mashable. And I mean, it's coming whether you like it, whether we like it or not, and it's definitely something that we should encourage. However, with the push of the Great Reset and ideas like we should rent everything and no one should own anything, concepts like these coupled together paint an unfavorable picture in my eyes. That's just me. And like I can't wait for everyone to have an EV. And Japan's, because Japan came out with the first like commercialized flying car. It's a solo passenger, and it's like I can't wait for that. Like the future is now. I'm excited. However, we have to be weary of concepts that, I mean, they're dystopian. They're dystopian. For example, Scottish visa call to tackle depopulation. And you're seeing all of these talks kind of crop up simultaneously. Another great example, actually, would be what I've been pointing out in terms of the Middle East, right? We have the bombings. We basically have a decreased amount, and it's not like it abated completely, but we saw efforts among the Iraqi and Afghan government to try and quell what was happening there. The ongoing insurgency that was still there, but hadn't grown. It hadn't diminished very much past what we had done there, but it hadn't grown either. They were kind of stalemated, I guess. But it at least gave time for the governments to form, for consolidation and construction and go on, etc. So right before, I can't remember if it's right before or right after Biden was elected, we have the two suicide bombings. And right before the two suicide bombings, we have John Bolton, which is the former national security advisor, I believe, talking about, and he's the guy who under the Obama administration was talking about the sort of island hopping stratagem for the Middle East, going from Iraq to Afghanistan to Syria to Libya, and I know I'm leaving a few off, but there are 7 countries, and he got he didn't get a lot of flack of that, not enough, but there was no mainstream coverage of it, because what ended up happening is the Biden administration basically carried that foreign policy out abroad. So now, here we are. And you have defense officials calling for engaged activity in the Middle East. And you have former President Trump bringing down troop levels to 2,500, right, in Afghanistan. That's what the papers are saying, right, when we had 25,000 National Guardsmen in D.C., which I think are still there, I believe, in an ongoing, prolonged occupation of the nation's capital, mind you. What is it, posse comitatus? I believe that is the law. But they were saying, oh, yes, there's more troops. There's 10 times more troops in D.C. than there are in Afghanistan. That was true at the time. And then Biden came into office, and just like that, we sent troops to Afghanistan, to Iraq, and to the Syrian border because Russia sent troops to the Turkish border, Turkey and Syria bordering each other. And here we are within an antagonized Middle East situation all over again. Iran, I believe, I just read a side note, even though I didn't pull it up as an article to cover, just booted out nuclear investigators. What are they? Iranian inspectors, excuse me. I remember I made that mistake last time. They're not investigators. Investigators look into a crime. Inspectors appraise or observe, right? They're observers. So we have an increasing Middle East situation out of nowhere. And we had talks, really saber-rattling, as they call it, beforehand. Well, you're seeing the same thing now, right? Just like after 9/11, you saw the terrorists, the anti-terrorism talk, and what that led to, and the function creeping in terms of the laws and the prolonged military engagements. So behind every action, there's always the preceding talk and the increasing, vocalization, increasing proselytizing for the subject, right? You have the Great Reset coming out, and the World Economic Forum, and then now with Bill Gates and the synthetic meat, and Scottish visa, call to tackle depopulation. Let's take a look at what they mean by this. Rural and island communities have been among the worst hit by depopulation in recent years. One idea put forward by a group advising the Scottish government was for a Scottish visa to attract overseas workers to specific areas. The UK government has previously rejected regional immigration rules as overly complicated. The number of people working and of working age in Scotland's remote area is below the national average, with these parts of the country also having a higher share of pensioners. The report from the Scottish government's expert advisory group on migration and population said positive net migration to rural areas had remained at very low levels. The group put forward 3 ideas for the Scottish and UK governments to consider. Relaxing conditions of the UK government's skilled worker visa for specific geographic areas through a shortage occupation list. A point-based Scottish visa allowing migrants with relevant skills to move to designated rural areas. A scheme to identify jobs seen as crucial for mitigating population decline, and the private and public sector then working together to protect these types of occupations. The report also makes the point that a new scheme should not aim to achieve replacement migration to offset population decline. It adds rather, it should be targeted to attract migrants with the skills and profile that would best address socioeconomic challenges by population decline. However, excuse me, any initiatives to alter migration policy would also have to be agreed by the UK government, as the issue is reserved to Westminster. And they want to shrink that island as much as possible. Post-Brexit, the UK government has introduced a points-based immigration system that says it works in the interest of the whole United Kingdom, including Scotland. Ministers have previously warned different rules on migration around the UK could massively complicate the system. But they're different regions. This is part of the problem. This whole unification principle, everybody hit with the same hammer, doesn't work. It's one of these cases where you're actually eliminating the possibility of integration by creating like a small scope through which migration can happen. There can't be any sort of immigration and thus cultural integration if you have this tiny scope through which the migration occurs. And that's because they just want to shrink the island. I mean, that this has been a constant issue between the UK and Scotland for who knows how long. Centuries. So this isn't excuse me. I know, I keep clearing my throat. This isn't new. And it's unfortunate that they've had to resort to this, and then even this is kind of rebuffed. But here we are. So on our side of the globe, We have more Capitol Hill nonsense. I actually wanted to check this out because I found the headline interesting. Uh, so let's just see what the other scandal of the Capitol Hill riot is. Senate Majority Leader Charles Schumer captured the outrage of many citizens when he declared the riot last month to be the Pearl Harbor. Oh yes, yes, I actually did go through this. Of this generation that will live forever in infamy. It was certainly infamous, but some doubt if the two events are comparable. But that's because language is everything, right? I remember this. This is an opinion piece that kind of it makes a very similar point to what I was about the language that's being used around the event. Uh, one cannot dismiss the importance of language while simultaneously saying that it was language that incited the riot in the first place. So when some people are like, "Oh, well, you're just trying to create a straw man argument and turn attention away from the importance of the riot, what was said," and it's like, no, exactly. I'm talking about the importance of words. I'm always talking about the importance of words. And I can appreciate the opinion piece, although it is kind of biased because it is an opinion piece. I can appreciate the opinion piece attempting to identify the fact that trying to bring that level of gravity is a dangerous precedent to set. But yes, let us continue down the path of nonsense here. 6 more alleged Oath Keepers charged over Capitol riot. Federal prosecutors announced charges on Friday against 6 people affiliated with the right-wing paramilitary group Oath Keepers for their role in the Capitol Hill riot last month. All 6 were arrested this week in Florida, North Carolina, and Ohio. They are facing various charges, including conspiracy and obstruction of an official proceeding, which carries a maximum of 20 years in prison. They always describe the maximum. I mean, I guess you should describe the maximum. They're not legal experts, so I guess trying to depict the likelihood of what they're going to receive would be ill-advised. So, okay. According to the U.S. Attorney's Office in D.C., all 6 are being charged as co-defendants, along with 3 other people affiliated with the Oath Keepers who have been charged last month. Graydon Young, Kelly Megg, and Connie Megg. Oh, you got your sister involved? Oh, okay. Older sister got younger. It doesn't matter. Were arrested in Florida this week. Laura Steele, 52, was arrested in Greensboro, and Sandra Ruth Parker, Bernie Alvin Parker were both arrested in Morrow, Ohio. Authorities have already charged Jessica Marie Watkins of Ohio and 2 of her companions. Yada, yada, yada. What? Okay, here we go. According to the prosecutors, Watkins had been awaiting activation from former President Trump in the weeks after the election. Do you have evidence of this? There's a link to an article. Dare I click it? The Oath Keepers are alleged to have conspired together to storm the Capitol to obstruct Congress's certification of the elect. Now, I mean, this is an actual group. You probably can find, communication within the group, and this is like they probably have these guys dead to rights. This is what I'm talking about. So, among the demographics of people that were there, the rioters that were there, this is definitely the demographic that I was referring to that actually did plan to go there to do work. So they probably have these people dead to rights. And depending on the severity of the work that they planned on, and even still, even if their language didn't suggest that they planned on doing anything volatile, the fact that they did is where, the whole concept comes into play where, if you plan a robbery and someone dies during, it's like you planned civil unrest. Now, you may not have planned for people to die. You may not have planned for a riot. You may not have planned to storm the Capitol, but you planned unrest. That unrest that you planned got out of hand. That's on you. So they got these guys dead to rights. So they allegedly conspired to obstruct the electoral vote. Prosecutors pointed to images and videos of the riot that show members of the group moving through the crowd in a tactical formation called a stack. Now no. See, that's not. Oh God. Let's hope that the defense aren't that dim-witted, because you have to go after the social media. They have communications. They have to be there. But simply suggesting that they moved in a tactical formation isn't enough to suggest that their actions there overall were coordinated. Like, groups moving to that doesn't make sense. Having training doesn't suggest, and I mean, yes, there is tactical training for civil disobedience. right? You can look at the World Trade Organization. Well, it turned into a riot, but it was essentially it started at first as a protest against the World Trade Organization in Seattle, 1999. And from there, both law enforcement as well as protesters globally, and anarchists and anti-fascists, things like that, globally, learned a lot of lessons. Because, I mean, there's video footage, there's movies made about it. You know, pregnant woman got her arm broken. There is a whole match. She got beat with nunchucks. There's a whole thing, which are illegal, by the way. There's a whole thing. But from that grew the concept of, like, counter activity. Like, not counter protesting, but, like, counter activity in a protest. I forgot what the term is. But it's really like guerrilla protesting, right? You know, the types of masks to don in order to counter gas, certain, like, there's stacks, right? There's certain formations that you hold in order to not be, like, overrun by police officers, things like that, right? And riot gear and shields, etc. You know, you get hit with pepper spray. They got medics. That's what I mean. Like, they actually have, you know, not a ranking system per se, but they have a sort of a class system where people have roles. And they have medics with all sorts of bandages and things like what you expect a medic to have in specific materials and solutions to put in your eye if you get hit with stuff, but like sprays and stuff, all sorts of stuff. So there's a whole doctrine. There you go. There's an entire doctrine based around countering police action during a protest. I've engaged in some of it. So the simple fact that they got into formation in order to counteract police action does not suggest prior conspiring. What will suggest prior conspiring is simply to subpoena them for their social media. They've had to talk about this. Come on, guys. Don't play around. Because what it is it's this demonizing and this sort of hyperbolizing to a hyper negative degree common things that you've seen in anti-government protests for years. I again highly suggest, if you're a younger listener or viewer, to just go and YouTube WTO protest 1999 Seattle or anything of that variety. And then there's a movie made about it called Battle. I think it was called Battle for Seattle. And so I highly advise you to take a look at that and just the history of protesting in general. And again, I've always been an advocate for nonviolent protests, and historically speaking, it is generally nonviolent protests and nonviolent movements that have been effective in implementing their causes in the long term. Okay? That being said, however, things have gotten violent all the time, always. And I'm not admonishing, the riots or anything. What I'm merely saying is that we've always had an idea, historically speaking, as a species, and then historically speaking in this country, what inciting, like, hate and violence is. And the rhetoric that is heard at a speech, you got to stand up and fight, you got to be strong, don't let them, you know what I mean? That sort of rhetoric has never, ever been considered inflammatory, okay, up until this. And then that's why now, Lord, and that's one of the reasons why I won't bother covering it, but I did point out that it exists. You have whole websites dedicated to going through and picking out through the representatives' tweets, their Twitter accounts, all of the so-called all of the so-called inflammatory or antagonistic language that they've used that really is just the same rhetoric that has always been used. I mean, some of it is, because again, although I applaud Maxine Waters during the short seller hearing, the committee hearing, you know, it's not, I don't stand with people. I stand with the principles. And her calling for Democratic constituents to go and ambush Republicans in the streets and Trump supporters, MAGA supporters, and all that stuff, and all that stuff. That is the type of stuff that you're supposed to call out, and that wasn't, because the guy in office was the guy everyone hated. One wrong does not wash the other. It never will, and so. But they do end up talking about their social media. That's what I was saying. It's like just saying that they were being tactically sound that's not a way to get them on conspiracy. So to continue, Kelly Meggs, allegedly a member of the Florida Oath Keepers chapter, sent a Facebook message in December saying, Trump said it's going to be wild. It's going to be wild. He wants us to make it wild. That's what he's saying. He called us all to the Capitol and wants us to make it wild. Sir, yes, sir. Gentlemen, we are heading to D.C. Pack your shit. Now, God. All right. So obviously, I have no way to know if these people were in direct contact with the President of the United States. That is a level of conspiracy that I've always found to be a thing that conspiracy theorists drum up. Do you really think that the President of the United States would do anything to put him in a position to be criminally liable for anything that occurred? That doesn't make any fucking sense. I mean, there are people out there who really do think that he's a grade A moron with the IQ level of a turd, which is fine, but you don't get to be the shark that he is. You don't get to be that level of demon by being an idiot. You don't. And I'm not saying he's like a genius or anything. I'm just saying he knows how he's a good shark. What can I? He's a good demon. He's lasted this long. He's lasted through bankruptcies. He's lasted through lawsuits. He's lasted through criminal investigations and indictments. He became president throughout all of it. So it's like, yo, say what you want, but this James Bond cartoon villain is fucking this whatever. All right. So that being said, do you really think he would put himself in a position to be incriminated with these idiots who go on social media? That's what I mean. That's what I mean. So the whole thing is that you can get the Oath Keepers individually conspiring amongst themselves to create violent unrest. That's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about subpoena them for their internal communications, right? Not just the stuff they're posting on their wall to the public, but the private stuff. And then that way you can get them on conspiracy. But this actually suggesting that they're like, oh, they keep this. Oh God, this is fucking hysterical. Whatever. Like I said, I'm not a prosecutor. I'm not a legal expert. I'm just trying to see things in a reasonable fashion. At the time, according to the prosecutors, Young, who's also said to be a member of the same Florida chapter, allegedly arranged for a group to receive instruction from a Florida company that specializes in combat and firearms training. Okay, now we got something. Now we're talking. The Justice Department pointed to messages from people in the group that appeared to suggest they were willing to go into the Capitol unarmed on January 6th because they would have a heavy QRF, which is a quick reaction force, 10 minutes out, a military acronym for quick reaction force, there we go, which are typically units capable of rapid deployment. Okay, in addition to the various charges that all nine are facing, Caldwell and Young are also accused of tampering with evidence for deleting Facebook messages. It's unclear if any of the 6 new defendants are represented by attorneys. Now, off the jump, whenever I hear like, oh, tampering with evidence, I'd always heard about that. And I didn't understand, like, how are they getting tampering with evidence? I don't get it. It's like, oh, deleting the Facebook messages. Yeah, that's, and you're like, well, wait a minute. It's a private company. Shouldn't they have to subpoena the private company first? And it's like, well, perhaps they did. And that's the whole thing. Perhaps they did. And you, oh Lord, it's just the rabbit hole of hilarity for all of this it's ceaseless. It's endless. It is endless. Meanwhile, right, there's things going on that we should cover with Biden. His failure to deal with the Iranian situation in a timely manner. His need to, well, the prolonging in order to get budget reconciliation on the move. The delay, I should say. The delay. Okay, so the delay to get budget reconciliation on the move coincides with his desire. What did he call it? Bipartisan curiosity. It almost has like a sexual innuendo to it. Let's see what else. Oh, near a tandem. Need I say more? Near a tandem. I actually one of these days need to do just a whole video on near tandem. Anyway, yeah, something in my eye and it won't go away. But yeah, he's just getting softball questions being the reports that we're getting is like, oh, he beat his granddaughter in Mario Kart at Camp David. Like, who gives a shit? And then we have stuff like this. Biden sparks Twitter debate over pronunciation of Midwest supermarket chain. Really? Really, The Hill? Really? Okay. All right. Well, it is to be expected. It is to be expected. They have no way to cover Biden. And here's the thing. Let's be honest. Do we really want them to try and because remember, negative press then demands the attention of the administration, and they have to deal with that. They have to take attention and resources and time and effort to deal with that one way or the other. So it's like, do we really want the media to try and dog the man while he's trying to get reconciliation through? No. However, we have to give the same scrutiny across the board. This is because the thing is, we are openly lying as a public, as a country, if we don't give the same scrutiny and then pretend like there's not a double standard there. But maybe that's just me. Maybe that's just me. Let's see here. Top Biden pick led group who took sponsored trips to China for pro-Beijing organization. This is what I'm saying. There's a lot of Chinese influence going on amongst the Biden administration. And I mean, we were talking about that prior to his inauguration. But nonetheless, it is troubling to see the increasing interwoven nature. A senior Biden camp pick for one of the top offices in the country also ran an organization which has participated in programs with a leading Chinese communist-backed propaganda organization for over a decade, even co-authoring reports with the group. So, but there's a lot to get through, so we're gonna keep moving here. Let's see. So Ted Cruz apparently Ted Cruz's text got blown up. Oh my God, whatever. Here we go. This is what Joe Manchin said. Yes. So Neera Tanden, actually now that she's been roasted, Manchin has recently come out and said that he probably isn't going to support Neera Tanden, which I think is a relief for him as well as everyone else, because he, like I was saying at the top of the show, he has been one of the opponents of both minimum wage and $1,400 checks across the board. And so I think this definitely is a thorn in the Biden administration's side, but I think this puts him in the pocket of any of his constituents who understand who Neera Tanden is. But let's read for a second here. Joe Manchin, a key Democratic senator, says he'll oppose Biden's nominee for budget chief, putting nomination in jeopardy. This was on the 19th, by the way. Manchin, a key Democrat and moderate Democrat, announced he would oppose Biden's nominee to run the Office of Management and Budget, throwing her nomination in jeopardy. Manchin said in a statement after reviewing Neera Tanden's public statements and tweets that were personally directed towards his Senate colleagues, he would oppose her nomination to run the powerful office. Now, that's all well and good. Everybody was like, "Oh, your ethics, you're a bully online and on social media. Oh no, oh no, oh no." And it's like, yes, that's true. That is one thing, but the reality is that she is highly corrupt. And as a former Clinton official, just like Diane, not Diane Feinstein. Oh my Lord, now I'm blanking their names. Debbie Wasserman Schultz, which was her former chief of staff was her name. And then the former head of the DNC at the time, what was her name? And it's Diane something. DNC Diane. This is Diane Donna Brazil. She ended up getting an anchor job on CNN after she wrote a tell-all book. And it's like, it's easy to write a tell-all book when everything is after the fact. You're supposed to come out. Anyway, I digress. The point is that, she's not a good person. She infamously said that she infamously said that if we were going to engage in a prolonged bombing campaign in Libya, that we should make them pay for it, is the long and short of what she said. Yeah, so, it is unfortunate that you have openly corrupt and misanthropic people being picked by the Biden office. The SecDef, his name is Lloyd, but he holds a position on the Raytheon board, things like that. Like, you pick a guy who works for a defense company or worked for a defense company. Remember, even if he relieves his position in Raytheon, we have to remember the revolving door within all of these industries. This is why Eisenhower warned us about the military-industrial complex. People come and go out of and to the private sector and into and out of government. And I believe he was pulled out of retirement while he was on the board of Raytheon to go and become SecDef, Secretary of Defense, that is. But that being said, let us get into some COVID news because we always got to get this COVID news going. That's just a section of the show now. Former Detroit news anchor dies one day after receiving a COVID vaccination. Oh my God, Lloyd, why would you highlight this? Because I mean, we should, right? At least a little bit. There's also good news-ish if we get to that, because I mean, if you look, there's a lot. There's always a lot. A former Detroit news anchor who worked at the country's first black-owned television station died last Tuesday, a day after receiving the vaccine. Karen Hudson Samuels, 68, so she was in the vulnerable age range, who also worked as a producer and news director, was found dead in her home by her husband. Hudson Samuels' cause of death is not yet known. We suspect it may have just been a stroke, but because of the normal side effects of the vaccine, it may have masked that. Hopefully we'll know soon from the autopsy report. May she rest in peace. They stopped doing reports of the AEFIs. Now it's very possible that, it was very possible that after literally going every day of me reporting on adverse effects from immunization, that now all of a sudden there are no effects from immunization around the entire country and or planet. That is very possible. Anything is possible. Is it likely? Post 2020 world is a strange one. But let's put it this way. I'm not getting in on any of my feeds. Now, am I looking at, if you want to take a look here, this is the fun stuff. Sorry, listeners. But just looking at my like all of the publications I look at. These are the 7 I kind of look at daily. These are like the 7 or 8 that are mainstream media. These are my 10 weird ones, and these are like 8 or so that are kind of on the peripheral. So all in all, it's like 20 to 23 sort of sources. And then the random stuff that crops up from all these random local stuffs and all that stuff. And like there's nothing. This is not being talked about anymore. But let's talk about the world's first human challenge trials starting in the UK for COVID-19. We have arrived here, human trials. Healthy young volunteers will be infected with the virus to test vaccines and treatments in the world's first COVID-19 human challenge study, which will take place in the UK. The study, which has received ethics approval, will start in the next few weeks and recruit 90 people aged 18 to 30. This was 6 days ago. They will be exposed to the virus in a safe and controlled environment while medics monitor their health. The UK has given doses of a COVID vaccine to more than 15 million people. Human challenge studies have played a vital role in pushing the development of treatments for a number of diseases, including malaria, typhoid, cholera, and flu. The trials will help scientists work out the smallest amount of coronavirus needed to cause infection and how the body's immune system reacts to it. This will give doctors a better understanding of COVID-19, the disease caused by the virus, which will feed into the development of vaccines and treatments. Unique insights. The Human Challenge study is being delivered by a partnership between the UK government's Vaccine Task Force, Imperial College London, the Royal Free London NHS Foundation Trust, and the company hVivo, which has pioneered viral human challenge models. Cliff Dix, interim chair of the Vaccines Task Force, said, "We have secured a number of safe and effective vaccines for the UK, but it is essential that we continue to develop new vaccines and treatments for COVID. We expect these studies to offer unique insights into how the virus works and help us understand which promising vaccines offer the best chance of preventing the infection. We have hugely effective COVID-19 vaccines already, so why do we need challenge trials? First, they tell us things that are almost impossible to discover in the real world. How much virus does it take to start an infection? They've talked about viral load, but they don't know how much viral load. How much does the immune system mount its initial defense? How does the immune system mount its initial defense? Can you tell which people will develop symptoms or not? The trials in the UK will start off by focusing on these fundamental scientific questions, but there are also new vaccines in the pipeline and the virus itself is evolving. Later this year, it will become almost impossible to run large-scale COVID vaccine trials in the UK because so many people will have been immunized. But challenge trials involving just a small numbers of volunteers will give still the answer to crucial questions from how second-generation vaccines compare to whether vaccines protect against new variants. So that will be interesting to see develop. That was basically what everyone was waiting on. It's like, all right, well, at some point you have to, in order to stop speculating, you kind of have to infect people. And this has happened across the board with nuclear testing, the effect of radiation on the body. Unfortunately, the Tuskegee experiment, where they purposefully gave they gave black airmen syphilis, watch them go crazy and stuff. Yeah, the government's fun. But that's science, all in the name of science. So Cuomo, he's so screwed. And that's for good reason. I've never been a fan of him. I'm not a fan really of any politician, but I'm not a fan of politicians who tout themselves as heroes during a crisis, like simultaneously politicizing a crisis, using it to promote, to like launch yourself, your career, and then kind of like iconizing yourself, writing a book and hinting at a 2020 election run. Well, FBI U.S. Attorney in Brooklyn probing Cuomo administration on nursing homes. This is from the 18th. Because, it has come out that the numbers as far as nursing home casualties, well, they are casualties of a sort, but nursing home fatalities were around double of what was expected. We know as well that his not chief of staff, but I guess top aide in the coronavirus task force ratted him out. He spilled the beans on what he was doing, what she had to do in terms of hiding the numbers, because they believed that the true numbers could be used against them politically, which it's like, well, that's politics. And especially given the type of politician that he is, it's to be expected his comeuppance would be severe. But let's read. The FBI and U.S. Attorney's Office in Brooklyn have launched an investigation that is examining, at least in part, the actions of Governor Cuomo's coronavirus task force in its handling of nursing homes and other long-term care facilities during the pandemic, the Times Union has learned. Now, I wonder if they'll talk about this, but I did mention yesterday, it was probably yesterday, that this all comes from I believe the number was $2.1 million that the Greater Organization, what was the name of this organization? It was like the Greater Organization of something rather. What ended up happening is they donated to his campaign, $2.1 million. And this happens. This crisis happens. So as a result, what ends up happening is this organization is a cadre of like nursing home executives, and they create and draft legislation and give it to Cuomo to introduce like amendment legislation to change the language for corporate liability in case of any death that occurs as a result of nursing home negligence. And that's what this all stems from. Because what ends up happening is, obviously, if we find out that the numbers are far more exorbitant than we are assuming, then there would be a far louder outcry to have someone answer, to have someone, get their just desserts, to have some sort of action be taken. But there was none. And so now this language has been introduced. And so now no liability, there's no liability suit that can be filed against any corporate executive. Or against any organization, or against any of these nursing homes, and they're just that's a done deal. But we'll see if they talk about that. The probe by the U.S. Attorney's Office in Eastern District of New York is apparently in its early stages and is focusing on the work of some of the senior members of the government's task force, according to a person with direct knowledge of the matter who is not authorized to comment publicly. Last March, as the virus began spreading in New York, Cuomo issued a news release listing the 13 initial members of his task force, which had been headed by Linda Lacewell. I believe it was Lacewell that spoke. An attorney and former chief of staff for Cuomo. Lacewell is the superintendent of the State Department of Financial Services. Other task members include people who... nearly 3 weeks after the governor's task force was announced last year, the state health department issued an order directing nursing homes and other long-term care facilities that they must accept residents who were being discharged from hospitals, even if they were still testing positive for the disease, as long as they were able to care for them properly. I don't know how you'd be able to care for them properly if you don't normally have infected people in your nursing home. How would you have the means to care for infected people properly? That directive, which was rescinded less than 2 months later, has been the focus of a firestorm of criticism directed at Cuomo's administration, including allegations that the order, which the governor said was based on federal guidance, had contributed to the high number of fatalities of nursing home residents in New York. That assertion was largely dismissed in a report by the Department of Health that was released in July. Last month, the Office of Attorney General Letitia James issued a scathing report that concluded the practice may have increased the risk of COVID-19 infections at the congregate facilities, and that Cuomo's administration had delayed reporting that thousands of additional nursing home residents died at hospitals after being infected in their residential facilities. It's unclear whether the federal because what happens is that if they report it, then people look to, well, I mean, someone's got to account for this. We're going to sue, to which he then has to say, well, unfortunately, I introduced legislation that prohibits you to sue or do anything, to which they then say, well, why did you do that? To which he then says, well, they gave me $2.1 million. That's the line here. That's the ABC, right? Once people start looking at the exorbitant death numbers, they start looking at why. When they find out why, they ask then, well, why did you do that? To which he has to then say, well, I was paying back some political favors. Whoopsies. Whoopsie daisies. Dave & Buster's is suing the governor of New York. I mean, I've never eaten there. The struggling food and games chain filed a lawsuit against Andrew Cuomo, calling his mandate to keep arcades closed while similar businesses reopen arbitrary and unconstitutional. This is from the 17th. Well, I mean, I guess. Well, no. Okay, let's read a little bit. Struggling Entertainment, Dave & Buster's filed a lawsuit against Cuomo. The suit filed earlier this month said that similar businesses such as casino and bowling alleys have been allowed to stay open, while D&B has been closed and had to furlough nearly 1,200 employees and has had the long-term economic viability of its 11 food and games units across the state threatened. However, on Wednesday, Cuomo announced that indoor family entertainment centers and places of amusement could reopen at 25% capacity starting on the 26th of March. Face coverings and social distancing are required for all customers and staff, and all customers must have health screenings and temperature checks before entering. A health screening? How does that work? In New York, we base our decisions on science. Yeah. All right, whatever you say, Cuomo. Whatever you say. City eateries that can't pay rent won't survive under Cuomo's 25% rule. Now, mind you, all this is happening simultaneously, right? I point out, like, Amazon comes under fire for all of the death, right? Let's take a look at all of the Amazon, right? So when Amazon erased my book, and this is for listeners, you can't see, we're looking at all of my Amazon bookmarks right now, and it's like they vote on a union, but right, Amazon erased my book. We're talking about the censorship of Amazon of certain of books. We're not talking about like Mein Kampf, which I believe they sell. But we're talking about like books that are minutely controversial, that question contemporary ideas of cancel culture and things like that. So there's censorship there. We're talking about Amazon and Ring working with the police department, so they're getting flack there. We're talking about deaths that have happened at warehouses. We're talking about workers skipping bathroom breaks in order to keep their jobs. Multiple deaths, by the way, at Amazon warehouse. So we're talking about all that stuff. So as all of that comes to a forefront, comes to a head, what does Jeff Bezos do? Steps down as CEO. So coronavirus hits and Disney stock tank plummets. The shareholders, the major shareholders, board of directors they're flipping out and we're losing it. We got to figure out something. They try, and this is after Galaxy's Edge fails and they lose a lot of money there. This is after the Star Wars the trilogy fails and they lose a lot of money there. Then they got to close the parks. They got to shut down the cruises. They're losing a lot of money there. They're losing billions. And what does Bob Iger do? Steps away. Throws in Chapek. All right. Need I say more? So now Cuomo's coming under fire. Blah, blah, blah. You let tens of thousands of people more die than you ever told us, and this only happened because you let sick people back into where healthy people were. And then it comes to find out that we can't even address legally the executives or you for this. Per se, because I mean, we can't address the executives of the nursing homes that improperly cared for these sick people or healthy people, period. Everybody dropped the ball there because you introduced legislation, because this organization gave it to you, because they gave you millions of dollars. Well, what is he going to do? Well, let's just open everything back up. I'm being sued by businesses. No, you shouldn't sue me. I'm opening everything back up. No, it's going to be okay. So now, they're looking at the economic viability of 25%, and they're saying that's nothing. So new data from the NYC Hospitality Alliance shows that 9 out of 10 city restaurants couldn't pay the rent in December. And remember, 1 out of 6 restaurants across the country are gone. Yet, Governor Cuomo still insists on capping indoor dining in the city at 25% occupancy. This sounds like an opinion piece, sorry. That's not enough to keep the eateries from going under. It's the opinion of the data. The data, I should say. It's a survey. So the survey showed that 92% of more than 400 respondents couldn't afford to pay rent in December, up from 80% in June and 88% in October. Because they have their own bills to pay, only 36% of landlords formally deferred restaurants' rent, while 14% have renegotiated leases during the pandemic. Eateries saw some mercy. About 58% reported that the landlord had waived more than 50% of the rent owed, but that can't last forever. Again, Cuomo's restrictions are senseless. And so now, and that is an opinion piece. Okay. But the data shows that it's not going to be enough. And it actually a similar sort of macroscopic understanding can be applied to the stimulus. The reality is that once we get back to normal, whatever normal is, it's like coming up for air after drowning. It's like climbing out of the rubble after a bomb goes off. Like, yes, you're alive, but everything is destroyed around you. You are starting from zero, right? You can't. I know what it's like to start from zero. I've had absolutely nothing, living next to a dumpster, eating trash, begging for money. I've had nothing. I've been nothing. Almost died. Been nothing. So, the prospect of millions of people being in utter destitution, trying to grovel and scrape from literal nothing. It was one thing living from paycheck to paycheck, living hand to foot, making ends meet. You don't even have that anymore, right? And then let alone, let's say you then lose your home in the process. Now you're living out of your car. If you even can keep your car because you can't pay your car note or your insurance, so now you're at a homeless shelter. You spiral down and it compounds on itself. God forbid if you can't keep your mental faculties together, because a lot of this breaks people. It's traumatic. Not causes trauma. In and of itself is trauma. You know what I mean? It is a traumatic experience to be impoverished, to be a vagabond, man. Okay? To beg for money and to not know when you're going to eat. So the whole problem is that there's no consideration of the resources required to begin your life again. So, and the same concept is here. There's no consideration given to the fact that anyone who's lasted this long still needs to last a little longer to just get a little pennies to hopefully continue on forward, right? And that's if they receive, money, if they receive support in the form that it's in now, and even then it's not enough. It's always pennies. It's always pennies. So, I empathize for sure. But then we come to this. So, Cuomo's going to get it, and that's Cuomo. But I find this very interesting. Staying on the topic of eateries and COVID, waitress says she was fired from NYC eatery for not getting the COVID vaccination. Now, what have I said? What have I been saying? The government is not going to enforce vaccination. They're going to make it de facto by saying, Cuomo, right, almost got there. He said you got to have health screenings. Did he say you have to be vaccinated? I don't think he said you have to be vaccinated. But you have to have health screenings. And what was the other thing? Hold on. Let's go back here. It said you have to have health screenings and temperature checks. Okay, so we already get temperature checks. But they're doing everything right now except for mandating that in order for businesses to have patrons and employees, they have to be vaccinated. They cannot make the individual citizen. There's no way to do that, as far as I know, perhaps under a national state of emergency, perhaps, or martial law, obviously. But they can't make every citizen take the vaccine, but they can force individual operations to do it in order to operate. Private industry? Of course you can force private industry for the sake of public health. Yeah, of course. That's what we're seeing. We're starting to see the beginnings of businesses. I don't want to say capitulate, but acclimate to what's coming down the line anyway. Because the reality is that if you, as a business owner, want to CYA cover your ass, yeah, you probably would make them get vaccinated, or at least get bi-daily tests, right? Bi-daily tests. So you get a test and then you get, because I mean we have same day point of care result testing now. So but let's read about this waitress's plight here on the bottom of the show. A New York City waitress says she was fired from a popular Brooklyn restaurant after choosing not to get the vaccine for fear it might hurt her chances of getting pregnant. Bonnie Jacobson, 34, told the Post that management at Red Hook Tavern canned her on Monday because she balked at getting the shot immediately. It was shocking to me. I went through the stages. I'm hurt. I'm in shock. Then I got mad. Jacobson, who had been married since 2019, stressed that she's not an anti-vaxxer and fully supports people being inoculated, but says she wants to wait for more research on the vaccine's possible effects on fertility. The way I see it, getting the vaccine is for me. It protects me. If I'm not getting it, it's my choice, and I'd only be hurting myself. While that's not true, I understand where she's coming from. Because if you end up being a carrier getting someone else sick, ta-da, you've been a problem. You hurt someone else. Exactly. It's like, even if it doesn't affect you and your baby, and then you end up being like a dormant carrier, ta-da, you've hurt someone else. But I see where she's coming from. I empathize completely. The coronavirus vaccines available haven't even been tested on pregnant women. This is the problem that I was having with it not being tested on the elderly initially. This is the problem I was having on it. Or was it this is the problem I always have with remembering what they didn't and didn't do. I believe they did not test on the elderly populace, and then they tested on 16 or 17 to 19-year-olds, 16 to 18-year-olds later on. And the study I'm talking about is the Pfizer study. Because remember, the New York Times broke a lot of Pfizer trial data right before they got EUA approval, which is freaking nonsense. But I digress. So I definitely empathize, especially with all the AEFIs we were seeing. And yeah, she's right. None of them were pregnant people. I've never heard of a case of a pregnant woman getting an AEFI. Then again, I've never read about pregnant women being a part of the study. Yeah, I understand that for sure. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says that getting vaccinated is a personal choice for people who are pregnant, and that expectant mothers can speak to their doctors about whether it's right for them. Restaurant staffers in New York joined the list of people eligible for the shot earlier this month. Not long after, management at the buzzy Brooklyn Eatery emailed staffers to let them know they were eligible. He said later that it would be mandatory. The only exception to the policy would be if your own personal health or disability prohibits you from obtaining the vaccine. Jacobson, who, and it's like, that doesn't make sense. If your personal health or disability, well, first of all, I think being pregnant should count as prohibiting you if you so choose. But I'm not, you know what I mean? I'm not sure what other personal health issue or disability would count and have the same importance as being pregnant. Like, that's weird. That's very strange. How does being pregnant not count as a personal health or disability issue? That, you know what? Yeah, whatever. I'm waiting for a terminology. Like, they have anti-vaxxer to describe people who are against vaccines. I'm waiting for a terminology to describe vaccine zealots. People who have sort of interloped their personality into the culture of like anti-COVID. You know what I mean? Like, you gotta put the Karens, the Karens of the world, and the Chads who go into full overdrive because you have your mask beneath your nose. Gentlemen who are just like, the vaccine is mandatory, but if your own personal health or disability prohibits you, that's fine. But you being pregnant doesn't count. Like, you need to get. I'm like, what? The government's not even telling you that this is mandatory. Why are you making this? Because it's coming down the pipeline. Trust me. Jacobson, because right now we're seeing a situation where it's something like a third of Americans, I believe it's a third of Americans, still don't want to take the vaccine. However, simultaneously, we are seeing reports like we'll have herd immunity by April. Because this is true. COVID cases have dropped 77% in 6 weeks. Experts should level with the public about the good news, but they're not going to. See, it's a catch-20. It's a give and take. You have a situation where in some states, it is politically expedient to give people bread and circuses, like for Cuomo. You have situations in some states where they are still having issues with ICU admissions, like in California. So they still, certain regions still need to be locked down. You have some states that are experiencing the drop and still have no interest in relieving the lockdown because there is a culture that has been created around lockdowns and around like the anti-COVID. I don't know how to describe it. I'll come up with a term, but it is really a zealotry in the name of eliminating COVID. When in reality, we read, 2 months ago that the World Health Organization said that COVID is going to be endemic and it's here to stay. The Moderna CEO said, yeah, we're going to be dealing with COVID for a long time. So this whole idea that, the whole idea of how government is still interacting with the reality of this as if we need 99% herd immunity and we have to have the disease eliminated completely before we can go back to normal is unrealistic and I think more about political theater than anything else. But I digress. We've come to the end of the show. Please like, share, and subscribe if you like what I'm doing. And be well to yourself and to each other. Take care.